There is a road before you, a path, but you cannot see where it leads. The twists, the turns, the shadows, and the valleys. Life's journey is filled with uncertainty. And yet there is one who sees beyond the bend, beyond the horizon, beyond what your eyes can grasp. God knows the right path for you. There are moments in life when things don't make sense. You plan, you strive, you do everything you think is right, but the results don't align with your expectations. You wonder why doors remain closed, why opportunities slip through your fingers, why certain prayers seem to go unanswered. It's in these moments of confusion that a deeper truth must be understood. God's plan is far greater than your understanding. You see only the present, but God sees the whole picture. Imagine standing in a valley surrounded by mountains, unable to see what lies beyond. Your vision is limited, but God is above it all, viewing every path, every obstacle, and every outcome. What seems like a dead end to you is simply a bend in the road from His perspective. The path you wish to take may lead to harm, while the one He leads you on brings life and purpose. Think of Joseph, the favored son of Jacob. He had dreams of greatness, yet his journey was filled with betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. If Joseph had judged his life by his circumstances, he might have thought God had abandoned him. But in reality, every hardship was a divine setup. What seemed like injustice and suffering was positioning him for something far greater. He was not forgotten. He was being prepared. And in time, he rose to become second in command over Egypt, saving many lives, including his own family. What others meant for harm, God had already woven into His greater plan for good. The same is true in your life. You may not understand why you are facing certain struggles. You may not see how the pieces fit together. But faith requires trust in what you cannot see. If you judge your life only by your present circumstances, you may miss the unfolding masterpiece that God is creating. Every delay, every closed door, every disappointment is part of a larger design, one that is for your good, even when it doesn't feel that way. Many times people want immediate answers. They want clarity before they take a step. But God does not always provide explanations. He provides direction. He asks for faith, not full understanding. Just as a child does not always understand a parent's decision, we do not always grasp God's ways. A child may cry when a parent withholds something, not realizing it is for their protection. In the same way, what feels like denial from God may actually be His mercy shielding you from what you are not yet ready for. Think of the times you prayed for something that never happened, only to later realize how different your life would have been if you had received it. What you once thought was rejection, in hindsight was divine protection. What you believed was a loss was actually a setup for something greater. This is why trusting God's plan is essential. Your understanding is limited, but His wisdom is infinite. His ways are higher than yours, His thoughts beyond your comprehension. The key is to walk in faith, knowing that even when life feels uncertain, God has already gone ahead of you. You are not forgotten, not abandoned, not wandering aimlessly. You are being led, shaped, and positioned for something far beyond what you could ask or imagine. So do not lean on your own understanding, because your vision is incomplete. Trust that where He leads, there is purpose. Trust that even in the waiting, He is working. And trust that when the time is right, everything He has planned will come together, not according to your limited understanding, but according to His perfect will. What looks like a delay is often a divine redirection. There are times in life when things don't unfold the way you expected. You set out on a path believing it will take you to your destination, but suddenly the road is blocked. The opportunity you were counting on disappears. The person you trusted walks away. The door you were so sure would open remains shut. In that moment, it is easy to feel frustrated, disappointed, even abandoned. But what if what looks like a setback is actually God's way of protecting you? What if the delay is not a denial, but a detour leading you to something greater? God does not allow detours by accident. Every shift in your life has purpose. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what lies ahead, and He understands the dangers and the pitfalls that would come if you followed your own way. Sometimes he blocks the path you are on because he knows it would lead to destruction. Sometimes he removes people from your life because they would hinder your purpose. What feels like rejection is actually divine protection. What feels like failure is actually what feels like a loss is actually making room for something better. Consider the story of Jonah. He had his own plan, his own idea of where he wanted to go. But when he ran in the opposite direction of God's calling, he found himself swallowed by a great fish. That detour was not a punishment, it was a redirection. God was setting him back on the right path, the path that would fulfill his divine assignment. Without that storm, without that detour, Jonah would have continued in the wrong direction, away from his true calling. The detour saved him from missing his destiny. Many times, people become frustrated when they don't reach their goals as quickly as they expected. They assume that if things aren't happening on their timeline, they must be failing. But God's timing is not human timing. He moves according to his divine plan, and sometimes that means slowing things down. The waiting season is not wasted time, it is preparation. It is in the delays that character is built. It is in the setbacks that wisdom is gained. It is in the unexpected detours that people often find their true calling. Look back at your own life. How many times have you wanted something so badly only to later realize that it would not have been right for you? How many times have you felt disappointment over a missed opportunity only to see later that something far better was waiting? This is how God works. He is always guiding, always aligning things for your good. But you must trust him, even when the road doesn't make sense. Abraham and Sarah were promised a child, yet they waited for years with no sign of fulfillment. It seemed like nothing was happening. It seemed like God had forgotten his promise. But every delay was intentional. God was working even when they couldn't see it. And when the time was right, Isaac was born. Not according to their impatience, but according to God's perfect plan. When you find yourself facing detours and delays, resist the urge to be discouraged. Instead, recognize that God is still in control. He is closing the wrong doors so he can open the right ones. He is redirecting you from what is temporary toward what is eternal. Every delay, every redirection, every unexpected turn is leading you exactly where you are meant to be. You may not see it now, but one day you will look back and realize that what seemed like a setback was actually the hand of God, guiding you towards something far greater than you ever imagined. Fear is the enemy of faith. It paralyzes, clouds judgment, and keeps people from stepping into the fullness of what God has prepared for them. Fear whispers lies, telling you that you are not good enough, that the road ahead is too uncertain, that failure is inevitable. But faith silences fear. Faith declares that even when the path is unclear, God is still in control. Faith is not the absence of uncertainty, but the choice to trust in God's direction despite it. Throughout Scripture, there are countless examples of people who had every reason to be afraid but chose faith instead. When Peter stepped out of the boat to walk on water, the storm was raging around him. Logic would have told him to stay in the safety of the boat. Fear would have kept him from moving, but faith in the voice of Jesus gave him the courage to step out. As long as his focus remained on Jesus, he defied the natural laws that bound him. It was only when he let fear creep in that he began to sink. The lesson is clear. Fear drowns, but faith walks on water. Faith does not mean the absence of challenges. It does not mean that life will always be smooth, that the road ahead will be easy, or that there will be no storms. But faith means that no matter what happens, God is guiding each step. It means that when doors close, He is still leading. It means that even in the darkest moments, He is still present. Faith is the foundation that holds firm when everything else seems unstable. Abraham was called to leave everything familiar and go to a land that God would show him. He did not have a map. He was not given the full picture. He was simply told to go, and by faith he obeyed. If he had given in to fear, he would have never stepped into his destiny. If he had relied on human understanding, he would have stayed in his comfort zone. But faith called him forward, and because he trusted in God's promises, he became the father of many nations. There are moments in life when faith is the only thing that will carry you forward. when circumstances don't make sense, when the voices around you tell you to give up, when fear says it's impossible. Those are the moments that require trust in God's plan above your own reasoning. Faith is not about having all the answers. It is about knowing who holds the answers. Moses stood before the Red Sea with an army behind him and nowhere to turn. Fear would have told him to surrender. Logic would have told him that escape was impossible. But faith in the power of God led him to stretch out his hand, and in that moment, the sea parted. A way was made where there was no way. What seemed like a trap became the very path to freedom. When fear is allowed to take control, it leads to hesitation, second-guessing, and missed opportunities. But when faith takes the lead, mountains move, doors open, and miracles unfold. Faith is the key to stepping into the fullness of God's purpose. It is the difference between standing still in uncertainty and moving forward in divine confidence. No matter what the situation looks like, faith declares that God is greater. It says that He is working behind the scenes, aligning things for good, making a way even when none seems possible. Faith does not wait for everything to be clear before stepping forward. It moves in obedience, trusting that with each step God will reveal the next. Fear may whisper doubts, but faith shouts the truth. God is in control, and His path is always the right one. God's path is not always the easiest, but it is always the best. The ways of the world promise shortcuts, quick results, and an easy road, but they often lead to disappointment, regret, and emptiness. The path God lays before you may seem longer, more challenging, and even uncertain at times, but it is the path that leads to life, purpose, and true fulfillment. It is the path where His presence goes before you, where His wisdom directs your steps, and where His hand lifts you when you feel weak. It is the path that requires trust when things don't make sense, and obedience when your own understanding tells you otherwise. There is a reason why so many struggle with direction, feeling lost and unsure of their purpose. They seek their own way, chasing after what seems appealing in the moment rather than trusting in the one who sees the full picture. The ways of the world are deceptive. They tell you that success comes from pushing your own agenda, that happiness is found in temporary pleasures, and that meaning is created by your own efforts. But the truth is, apart from God, there is no lasting peace. Apart from His guidance, even the greatest achievements will feel empty. The world offers what looks like an easier way, but what seems smooth in the beginning often leads to hardship in the end. The path of God requires surrender. It requires letting go of control and allowing Him to direct each step. It is not about rushing to the destination, but about trusting in His perfect timing. So often, people want to know every detail before they move forward. They want to see the full plan before they take the first step. But faith does not work that way. God calls His people to walk in obedience even when they do not have all the answers. Abraham was told to leave his home and go to a land God would show him. He was not given all the details, but he trusted. Noah was instructed to build an ark when there was no sign of rain. He had no proof of the flood, but he obeyed. Mary was told she would give birth to the Messiah. She did not understand how, but she believed. The path of God is walked one step at a time, trusting that He will reveal each part of the journey as it unfolds. Obedience is often tested when the path becomes difficult. It is in the struggles that many are tempted to turn back, to question if they are on the right road. But just because the road is difficult does not mean it is the wrong one. The enemy wants people to believe that hardships are a sign they should give up. But in reality, resistance often comes when you are moving in the right direction. When the Israelites were on their way to the Promised Land, they faced battles, obstacles, and moments of great testing. The difficulty was not a sign that they were on the wrong path. It was proof that they were stepping into something greater. The easy road is tempting because it offers comfort and immediate gratification. But the easy road does not build character. It does not refine faith. It does not prepare you for the purpose God has placed on your life. The right path will stretch you, strengthen you, and deepen your trust in Him. It will take you through valleys before leading you to mountaintops. It will require patience, endurance, and faith in his promises. And while it may not always be the easiest road, it is the only road that leads to true fulfillment, purpose, and the life he has prepared for you. God's direction is often beyond human understanding. The ways of the world rely on logic, reason, and what seems practical in the moment, but God's ways transcend human wisdom. What appears impossible to man is possible with God. What seems like a setback is often a setup for something greater. The human mind is limited, seeing only a fraction of the full picture, but God sees the beginning and the end, weaving every moment together for his purpose. His guidance does not always come in the way one expects, but it always leads to the right place at the right time. There are moments when God's direction may seem unclear, when the path ahead looks uncertain, and when it feels as if he is silent. It is in those moments that faith is truly tested. Trusting in God's direction means believing that even when nothing makes sense, he is still leading. It means understanding that delays are not denials, that detours are often divine redirections, and that what may feel like unanswered prayers are often God's way of preparing something far greater. Joseph had dreams of leadership and greatness, but before he reached his destiny, he was betrayed, sold into slavery, and thrown into prison. If he had judged his journey by human understanding, he would have thought God had abandoned him. But God was working through every trial, positioning him in the right place at the right time. What seemed like suffering was preparation. What seemed like a prison was the path to the path. God's ways are not bound by human limitations. When the Israelites stood before the Red Sea, trapped between the water and Pharaoh's army, human understanding said there was no way out, but God had already prepared a path they could not see. When the walls of Jericho stood tall, human reasoning would have suggested military strategy, but God's command was to march and blow trumpets. What seemed illogical in the eyes of men was the very strategy that brought victory. The same is true in every life. When God gives direction, it does not always align with human expectations, but his way is always higher. There are times when God's leading may come through closed doors, redirecting away from what was once expected. What may feel like loss is often protection. What may feel like failure is often the foundation for something greater. The disciples must have struggled to understand why Jesus allowed himself to be crucified. They expected a conquering king, not a suffering savior. But what seemed like the ultimate defeat was the greatest victory in history. God's ways are beyond human comprehension, yet they are perfect. The world teaches people to rely on their own understanding, to trust in their own plans, and to seek their own way. But when people lean on their own wisdom, they limit themselves to what they can see and comprehend. Trusting in God's direction requires surrendering personal plans and embracing his greater purpose. It means believing that even when life takes unexpected turns, he is still in control. It means walking forward in obedience, even when the destination is unknown. It means resting in the assurance that he who created the heavens and the earth is also guiding every step. God's direction does not always come with clear explanations. Sometimes he calls for movement before revealing the destination. Sometimes he allows storms to test faith before bringing the breakthrough. But his path is always leading towards something greater. His plans are never random, and his timing is never wrong. The more one learns to trust in his direction, the more one will see how every twist, every delay, and every unexpected turn was always a part of his perfect design. Following God's path requires faith, patience, and trust. It is not a journey of immediate answers, instant results, or guaranteed comfort. It is a journey of surrender, where one walks forward not by sight but by faith, trusting that God's plan is unfolding even when it is unseen. The natural mind desires control, clarity, and certainty, yet God calls his people to step forward even when the path is not fully revealed. Abraham was told to leave his homeland without knowing where he was going. He had no map, no destination in sight, only the promise that God would lead him. His journey was one of faith, and through his trust, he became the father of many nations. Patience is required because God's timing is not the same as human timing. People often want things to happen immediately, to see results quickly, and to understand the full picture right away. But God works in seasons, in perfect order, and in ways that build character rather than cater to instant gratification. A seed does not grow into a tree overnight. A journey does not reach its destination in a single step. God's path is one of process, refinement, and preparation. Joseph had a dream of leadership, but years passed before it became a reality. In those years, he faced betrayal, imprisonment, and trials that tested his faith. Yet in every hardship, God was shaping him, preparing him for the very destiny that was spoken over his life. If Joseph had rushed the process, he would not have been ready for the responsibility. If he had become bitter and given up, he would have missed the fulfillment of God's promise. Trust is essential because there will be moments when the path seems unclear. There will be times when obstacles arise, when opposition appears stronger than progress, and when doubt whispers that turning back is the easier option. Trust means believing that even when things do not make sense, God is still in control. The Israelites faced the Red Sea with an army behind them, and in that moment, logic told them they were trapped. But God had already made a way before they could see it. The walls of Jericho stood high before the Israelites, and in human reasoning, victory seemed impossible. Yet God had already determined the outcome. Faith does not rely on what is seen. It stands on the truth that God is faithful to his promises. Following God's path is not about comfort, but about transformation. It is not always easy, but it always leads to growth. When challenges arise, they are not signs of abandonment, but invitations to deeper trust. When prayers seem unanswered, it is not because God is absent, but because he is working beyond human understanding. A delay does not mean denial. A setback does not mean failure. God's ways are higher, his plans are greater, and his timing is perfect. The waiting season is not wasted, it is a season of preparation. Walking in faith, patience, and trust means surrendering the need for full control and embracing the reality that God knows what is best. It means being willing to follow, even when the road is difficult, knowing that trials refine faith and strengthen character. It means trusting that what is happening now is not the end of the story, but a chapter in the greater plan. Every moment of waiting, every challenge faced, and every test of faith is shaping something far greater than can be seen. Trusting God's path does not mean it will always be easy, but it guarantees that every step is leading toward his perfect will, his greater purpose, and the fulfillment of his promises. God knows the right path for you even when you cannot see it. His ways are higher, his timing is perfect, and his plans are greater than anything you could imagine. Trust in his guidance even when the road is uncertain. Have faith that every delay, every challenge, and every redirection is shaping you for something greater. Do not rely on human understanding, but walk in obedience, patience, and unwavering trust. The journey may not always be easy, but it will always lead to his perfect will. Stay faithful, keep moving forward, and know that God's path is always the right one.